Chris Bray.
Would you allow your son to come to witchcraft?
Well, of course not, no.
Well, then, why deny us that facility, that freedom?
We are not...
In reverse.
May I come in there? We're not denying you that facility or that freedom. Every man has a free choice to declare his own destiny and find his own destiny. But Jesus Christ has said that when Satan speaks...
Jesus Christ is a prophet. There are many prophets.
There are many
prophets.
Yes, there's one prophet. Can I speak? Can I finish this?
Please do.
Jesus Christ said that when Satan speaks, he speaks his own native language, which is a liar. And he's
Look,
been
my
a
friend,
liar.
Okay.
I have 25,000 very close acquaintances,
Yes.
clients who I supply.
I have thousands of Christians who hold to the same truth.
Of course, and on a head count, we should all be Buddhists because they have the majority.
We're not going to
we're not going to get anywhere on that basis, are we?
We're not going to get very far talking about numbers.
There is nobody who I know who is involved in what you're talking about.
Eric,
You're talking
you must
about
have been involved in... Hold on a minute.
Chris, please.
You must have been involved in conversations.
Thank you.
You must have been involved in conversations and debates like this, time without number. Do you think that it is a debate that is about the serious power of evil that is harming people, or are people on both sides completely overreacting?
Yes, I'm quite convinced of their sincerity, but that doesn't help, because the Holy Inquisition was tremendously sincere when it applied the rack. And remember, some 400,000 witches died in accordance with the injunction in the Book of Words, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. And when they repealed the laws against witchcraft, the church was violently opposed to it. So we don't find mercy. What I don't like about the church, and I don't like about Christianity, it tries to monopolise, it tries to take over.
Do you feel persecuted, Nigel?
Yes, I do, but I also feel that truth is persecuted. I feel that there's a lot being said that implies that the church, because it claims to have the word of God, is de facto correct. Does this mean, I mean, for example, I'm not a Christian, I don't uphold Christian principles in terms of Christianity. What I object to is being told that I am wrong simply because Christians believe that they're right.
Okay, what about religious freedom, Robert? I mean, you do allow it to all the other faiths that exist in Britain today.
Clearly, every single person has a choice in what he believes. But the key is what is truth. And Jesus said, I am the truth.
Well, that is a legitimate thing that you can believe, but you allow other beliefs. Why not this?
Yes.
May I answer that?
Yeah.
Because the Bible forbids it.
No, it
because
doesn't.
God is a good God.
It does not.
Is a good God. It does forbid it.
No,
May
it
I?
does not.
Does. Listen. Listen.
Doreen, I
It's
know what
written.
you're going to quote to me, Doreen.
There shall not be
Deuteronomy
found among you anyone who makes his son or daughter to pass through the fire, or who uses divination, or observer of times, or an enchanter of a witch, or a charmer of a consulter of mediums, and that's what it's forbidden by
I
God.
want to go back to Andy.
I am going to change the subject slightly here, because I want to know, Chris, I want to ask you, I mean, I saw the film that you were on there, and I see you've got 25,000 people who actually are your customer. It's got to be a pretty big business, hasn't it, really?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Can I comment on that?
Yes, if you'd like to.
I mean, the fact that there are 25,000 subscribers, I mean, there could be 3 million subscribers, because it's back to choice again and the sort of spiritual climate in which we're living. The fact is that
do you think these people are being ripped off, basically, then? Is that what you're saying?
Well, they're investing their cash in something that they're getting something out of.
Well, if that's the question, look at the Vatican's riches.
Well, that's a different issue again. Obviously, they're getting something out of it, but I personally feel it's not very, very helpful to them. But the fact of numbers is irrelevant, because within us we will seek after things. We'll seek after supernatural experiences.
But isn't the number of people that are now following the occult or witchcraft, isn't that concerning you? I mean, what is the church doing?
Absolutely. But I mean, numbers are also growing in church circles.
Merlin, I want to ask you something now, because we're running out short of time.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you are always in control of what is around you? Do you actually really, deep down inside, know what you're doing with, and you never ever feel that you might be playing with something you can't handle?
No, and I feel very sorry for the people who do not understand. I have 2 laws I live by. My first law is my truth is based upon my experience of what I believe. And my second law, respect other people's truth. In that way, we may have a link in the chain of understanding.
I think I'm going to leave the last word to Robert Ferguson and the panel.
Well, I can only say that anyone who gets involved in the occult is liable to get their fingers burnt. Jesus said he's come to give us life better than we can find it anywhere else. And that is what I believe, and that is what I preach. And that is what I trust, that each one of us can come to that truth.
Are we not just a threat to your popularity then?
The church is growing. The church is growing to a massive extent all over the world. There are thousands of Christians.
You come to one of my circles and find out what we really do, and I'll come to your church quite happily.
The church in the Middle Ages was in the curious position of condemning witchcraft when it was virtually in the business itself.
The medieval church had an elaborate repertoire of benedictions and consecrations designed to drive away evil spirits and give protection against fevers and floods and dangers of all kinds. And there were amulets, of course, for the individual Christian to wear. In addition, a great number of superstitions surrounded the sacraments of the church, in particular the miracle of the Mass. It was thought that a communicant who didn't swallow the bread but took it away in his mouth was in possession of a really impressive source of magical power. The church also proclaimed the existence of a devil and his attendant demons who were, so to speak, in rivalry to Christ and his saints. But the church said that they had holy water, and the sign of the cross, and exorcism, which would drive away demons and give protection against them. Any miraculous effect achieved without the church's sanction was witchcraft, because it must somehow or other have involved the aid of the devil. The effect of the Reformation was to reaffirm the reality of the devil and evil spirits and witchcraft, but to say that the church's repertoire of protection was useless, that the sign of the cross and exorcism were powerless and indeed superstitious. In other words, the Protestants disarmed themselves in face of the old enemy. They also forbade counter-magic, popular charms against witches, and so they left the imaginary victim of witchcraft with no alternative but to prosecute the witch in the law courts.
I think in the old days, people very often did put a curse on someone that worked, because you see, people were very much wronged, perhaps by, say, the local squire turned them out of their home and they had no redress at law or something like that. No human law could do anything for them. And when a person was really wronged and cursed someone from the marrow of their bones, believing in every word of it, then that sort of curse with justice behind it did work. I'd say to a person who really wanted to know what was the spirit of witchcraft, that they'll learn more by, say, going out on the downs at midnight and listening to the wind in the trees and looking at the full moon. They'll learn more of the spirit of witchcraft, the real spirit of witchcraft, in that way than they will by reading any amount of books.
You know, Paracelsus said that the beginning of all magical operations is determined imagination. And this is what we set out to do. Get a mental picture of the thing we wish to achieve, and in that way concentrate on getting it.
We're dealing with an area which has got a lot of myths and a lot of exaggeration attached to it. We're used in the 20th century to the image of the old hag, which I guess is based somewhat on Shakespeare's view of witches, the evil old woman stirring up her brews in a pot and so on. But witches in the traditional sense were never really like that.
The poisoned entries through. Toad. And under cold stone days and nights has 31. Poison venom, sleeping god. Boil thou first in the charmed pot.
Even the use of 3 witches in the play reflects folklore. It is a mystical number, the beginning, middle, and end, the phases of the moon, birth, life, and death, and mother, father, and child. Perhaps the best example of persecution of a so-called witch for political aims is to be found in the story of Joan of Arc. She had become a threat to the church and the state, but rumours of witchery and the voices she admitted to hearing in her head were used as a legitimate reason to execute her. Joan of Arc was burnt at the stake by the church in 1431 for heresy. There can be little doubt that this was solely for political reasons, because 500 years later, Joan was canonized by the very church who put her to death. It is thought that as the last ice age advanced south, European man believed in two images that explained their way of existence. The goddess of the earth, she who created all life in all forms, and the horned man, he that experienced life and death as both hunter and hunted. As the early hunter-gatherers became farmers in their hill forts and settled in their towns and villages, their ritual beliefs are thought to have become more organized. Structures like Stonehenge and Avebury, sitting in their complex landscapes of barrows, hill forts and avenues, may point to an ordering, an organizing of the religious life of the communities. As the communities became more complex, so did the organization. The Greek and Roman ancient societies formalized their concepts of gods into pantheons. In this, they reflected the Norse and other societies that had gone before them. And yet, the common theme of the Earth Mother and the horned man runs through them all. It was with the coming of the early Christian church that the seeds for the later persecution were sown. Roman Emperor Constantine I, at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, had the problem of bringing together all the different strands of the organized religions that existed at that time. He had been converted to Christianity and wanted to settle the arguments about the divinity of Jesus. Out of this council came the Bible and the early Christian church as we know it. At first, there was a great deal of harmony between the Christians and the followers of other ways. It made sense to place the major Christian festivals, like Easter and Christmas, at the spring equinox and winter solstice, which were already established as a time of celebration and ritual. Images from the early faiths have even been incorporated into Christianity. During Advent, Christ is compared to the sun as the light of the world, and the image of a green man can be found in many churches.
I think you'll find that the roots of Christian beliefs can't be found in paganism. They're found in Judaism. But what we do find in paganism are the roots of the way we go about expressing our beliefs, in the sense that the Christian festivals have evolved out of their pagan roots, where the festivals were taken over. For example, Christmas round the winter solstice, Candlemas round Imbolc, and the like.
But as Christianity reached out into rural Europe, the common folk saw little difference between the story of Christ and Mary and their own version of the Earth Mother and Child. They had little fear of Christianity's effect on politics and the state. Therefore, they were able to believe in both religions. The old ways continued as they had before, with the wise ones at the center of authority in the villages and hamlets. These were the ones that people would turn to for magic, healing, and prophecy, the ones who bore the knowledge of the ancients. Eventually, they would collectively be known by the Anglo-Saxon term Wicca, roughly translated as the shaper or bender of the unknown. This would become the definition for witch. But this harmony of the two religions living side by side was to be short-lived. This is where the persecution began. The Church condemned the Earth Mother by declaring that as a goddess of earth, she was the creator of earthly delights and pleasures, which the Bible had declared as sin. They went on to proclaim the horned man was the personification of the devil, an angel that had been cast out of heaven for his sins, and who created and resided in hell. A healing ritual is performed by many paganists annually to denote their devotion to the earth. They assemble at different locations all over the world to celebrate or heal the earth with love. The ritual they perform is designed to return some of the power the earth has given them to its source. They focus on the life-giving resources the earth provides.
We can see a sense in which modern witchcraft connects very well with the green movement, the concerns about ecology, about getting back to the earth and not damaging the earth. And that, of course, is what modern witchcraft, or one of the most important tenets of modern witchcraft, is living in harmony with the natural order. And if I wanted to summarise modern witchcraft, that's the way I would summarise it.
With modern-day writers spinning tales of witches and witchcraft aimed at children, the traditional question asked on storm-battered, rain-drenched, wind-blasted heath of when shall we three meet again is more likely to be answered with, well, I can manage next Tuesday, than with fear and persecution. Torture and the stake have given way to entertainment and a newfound faith in older ways. Witchcraft is mainly represented through literature and the media, portrayed with a traditional image. We can see now that this is a far cry from the true practices of the craft.
Hermetic magic is an art, a philosophy, and a very ancient and powerful religion. Yes, a religion, but with an essential difference from other religions. Where they depend upon faith for their salvation, we seek the wisdom and power of the Gnosis. Know yourself, for in your temple you are one with the gods. What is the best religion for a magician? Most of us have been raised in one or another of the biblically based faiths, none of which are supportive of the practice of magic. And yet, old King Solomon was deemed to have been the greatest magician of the ages. What was his religion? Judaism? Well, officially, perhaps. But I believe that King Solomon's secret religion was the same as Melchizedek's 1,000 years earlier. The ancient religion behind the Bible, the oldest religion, the religion of ancient Canaan and Phoenicia, the religion of King Solomon's friend, King Hiram of Tyre, who helped him to build the great temple in Jerusalem, the temple to God. But how did they spell God's name? With such a vision shining out of the mists of time, there came a compulsion to resurrect this ancient, magical religion.
In Genesis, we read about a man by the name of Cain who slew his brother Abel. See, they shared the same blood. You see, Cain killed his brother Abel, told me that Cain did not regard his brother's life. His brother's blood was not precious to him. If you are a brother and sister, a fleshly brother and sister, and you share the same blood, you have the same parents, why would you allow an organization to drive a wedge in between you and the other person? Why would you do that? Because an organization of men say it? Would Christ do that? And then what you do is you use scriptures that you misapply to make them think as if, oh, that's what you're supposed to do. But yet you're not looking at the example of Christ's life. We have examples in Scripture where the scribes and Pharisees condemned an adulterous woman for adultery, obviously, and they sentenced her to death by stoning. And then Jesus comes along and he says, "Let him without sin cast the first stone." And you know the rest of the story. The oldest person from the youngest left, and in the end, all that was left there were Jesus and this woman. And Jesus asked this woman to look around her, and he asked her, "Who condemns you now?" And the woman says, "No one." And Jesus says, "Neither do I condemn you."
Sir Thomas More decides that he would rather die than lie or betray his faith. And at one moment, Moore is arguing with a particularly vicious witch-hunting prosecutor, a servant of the king and a hungry and ambitious man. And Moore says to this man, you'd break the law to punish the devil, wouldn't you? And the prosecutor, the witch hunter, says, break it? He said, I'd cut down every law in England if I could do that, if I could capture him. And Moore says, yes, you would, wouldn't you? And then when you'd corner the devil and the devil turned round to meet you, where would you run for protection? All the laws of England having been cut down and flattened, who would protect you then? Bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that every time you violate or propose to violate the free speech of someone else, you, in potentia, you're making a rod for your own back, because the other question raised by Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes is simply this: who's going to decide? To whom do you award the right to decide which speech is harmful, or who is the harmful speaker, or to determine in advance what are the harmful consequences going to be that we know enough about in advance to prevent? To whom would you give this job? To whom are you going to award the task of being the censor? Isn't it a famous old story that the man who has to read all the pornography in order to decide what's fit to be passed and what is fit not to be is the man most likely to become debauched? Did you hear any speaker in the opposition to this motion, eloquent as one of them was, to whom you would delegate the task of deciding for you what you could read? To whom you would give the job of deciding for you, relieve you of the responsibility of hearing what you might have to hear? Do you know anyone? Hands up. Do you know anyone to whom you'd give this job? Does anyone have a nominee? You mean there's no one in Canada good enough to decide what I can read or hear? I had no idea. But there's a law that says there must be such a person, or there's a subsection of some piddling law that says it. Well, the hell with that law then. It's inviting you to be liars and hypocrites and to deny what you evidently know already. Now, I am absolutely convinced that the main source of hatred in the world is religion and organized religion. Absolutely convinced of it. And I'm glad that you applaud, because it's a very great problem for those who oppose this motion, isn't it? How are they going to ban religion? How are they going to stop the expression of religious loathing, hatred, and bigotry? I speak as someone who's a fairly regular target of this, and not just in rhetorical form. I have been the target of many death threats. I know within a short distance of where I'm currently living in Washington, I can name 2 or 3 people whose names you'd probably know who can't go anywhere now without a security detail because of the criticisms they've made of one monotheism in particular. And this is in the capital city of the United States. So I know what I'm talking about, and I also have to notice that the sort of people who ring me up and say they know where my children go to school, and they certainly know what my home number is and where I live, and what they're going to do to them and to my wife and to me, and who I have to take seriously because they have done it to people I know, are just the people who are going to seek the protection of the hate speech law if I say what I think about their religion, which I'm now going to do. Because I don't have any what you might call ethnic bias. I have no grudge of that sort. I can rub along with pretty much anyone of any, as it were, origin or sexual orientation or language group, except people from Yorkshire, of course, who are completely untakeable. And I'm beginning to resent the confusion that's being imposed on us now, and there was some of it this evening, between religious belief, blasphemy, ethnicity, profanity, and what one might call multicultural etiquette. It's quite common now for people to use the expression, for example, anti-Islamic racism, as if an attack on a religion was an attack on an ethnic group. The word Islamophobia, in fact, is beginning to acquire the opprobrium of that was once reserved for racial prejudice. This is a subtle and very nasty insinuation that needs to be met head on. Who said, what if Falwell says he hates fags? What if people act upon that? The Bible says you have to hate fags. If Falwell says he's saying it because the Bible says so, he's right. Yes, it might make people go out and use violence. What are you going to do about that? You're up against a group of people who will say, you put your hands on our Bible or we'll call the hate speech police. Now, what are you going to do when you've dug that trap for yourself? Somebody said that anti-Semitism and Kristallnacht in Germany was the result of 10 years of Jew baiting. 10 years? You must be joking. It's the result of 2,000 years of Christianity based on one verse of one chapter of St. John's Gospel, which led to a pogrom after every Easter sermon every year for hundreds of years, because it claims that the Jews demanded the blood of Christ be on the heads of themselves and all their children to the remotest generation. That's the warrant and license for and incitement to anti-Jewish pogroms. What are you going to do about that? Where's your piddling subsection now? Does it say St. John's Gospel must be censored? Do I, who've read Freud and know what the future of an illusion really is and know that religious belief is ineradicable as long as we remain a stupid, poorly evolved mammalian species, think that some Canadian law is going to solve this problem? Please. No, our problem is this: our prefrontal lobes are too small, and our adrenaline glands are too big, and our thumb finger opposition isn't all that it might be. And we're afraid of the dark, and we're afraid to die, and we believe in the truths of holy books that are so stupid and so fabricated that a child can, and all children do, but as you can tell by their questions, actually see through them. Now, let's not dance around. Not all monotheisms are exactly the same at the moment. They're all based on the same illusion. They're all plagiarisms of each other. But there's one in particular that at the moment is posing a serious menace, not just to freedom of speech and freedom of expression, but to quite a lot of other freedoms too. And this is the religion that exhibits the horrible trio of self-hatred, self-righteousness, and self-pity. I'm talking about militant Islam. Globally, it's a gigantic power. Globally, it's a gigantic power. It controls an enormous amount of oil wealth, several large countries and states. With an enormous fortune, it's pumping the ideology of Wahhabism and Salafism around the world, poisoning societies where it goes, ruining the minds of children, stultifying the young in its madrasas, training people in violence, making a cult of death and suicide and murder. That's what it does globally. It's quite strong. In our societies, it poses as a cringing minority whose faith you might offend, which deserves all the protection that a small and vulnerable group might need. Now, it makes quite large claims for itself, doesn't it? It says it's the final revelation. It says that God spoke to one illiterate businessman in the Arabian Peninsula 3 times through an archangel, and that the resulting material, which as you can see when you read it, is largely plagiarized from the Old and the New Testament, almost all of it actually plagiarized ineptly from the Old and New Testament, is to be accepted as a divine revelation and as the final and unalterable one, and that those who do not accept this revelation are fit to be treated as cattle, infidels, potential chattel, slaves, and victims. Well, I tell you what, I don't think Muhammad ever heard those voices. I don't believe it. And the likelihood that I'm right, as opposed to the likelihood that a shepherd who couldn't, a businessman who couldn't read, had bits of the Old and New Testament redictated to him by an archangel, I think puts me much more near the position of being objectively correct. But who is the one under threat? The person who promulgates this and says, I'd better listen because if I don't, I'm in danger? Or me, who says, no, I think this is so silly you could even publish a cartoon about it? And up go the placards, and up go the yells and the howls and the screams. Behead those. This is in London. This is in Toronto. This is in New York. It's right in our midst now. Behead those who cartoon Islam. Do they get arrested for hate speech? No. Might I get in trouble for saying what I've just said about the Prophet Muhammad? Yes, I might. Where are your priorities, ladies and gentlemen? You're giving away what's most precious in your own society, and you're giving it away without a fight, and you're even praising the people who want to deny you the right to resist it. Shame on you while you do this. Make the best use of the time you've got left. This is really serious. Now, if you look anywhere you like, because we've had invocations of a rather drivelling and sickly kind tonight of our sympathy. What about the poor fags? What about the poor Jews, the wretched women who can't take the abuse, and the slaves and their descendants, and the tribes who didn't make it and were told that their land was forfeit? Look anywhere you like for the warrant for slavery, for the subjection of women as chattel, for the burning and flogging of homosexuals, for ethnic cleansing, for anti-Semitism, for all of this. You look no further than a famous book that's on every pulpit in this city and in every synagogue and in every mosque. And then just see whether you can square the fact that the force that is the main source of hatred is also the main caller for censorship. And when you realize that you're therefore this evening faced with a gigantic false antithesis, I hope that still won't stop you from giving the motion before you the resounding endorsement that it deserves. Thanks awfully. Night-night. Stay cool.
There's a figure in American Indian myths that represents this power of the dynamic of the total psyche to overthrow programs. This is the negative aspect, and it's called a trickster. It's a very, very important figure in American Indian mythologies. In the East, in the forest lands of the Northeast and Southeast, it's the great hare, a rabbit. When you go west of the Mississippi in the plains lands, it's coyote. You get up in the northwest coast, and it's raven. These are smart, clever birds and animals. Now, it's a great puzzler to well-trained Christians to come across the trickster hero, because he's both a kind of devil and fool and the creator of the world. And so he comes in as an upsetting factor. He breaks through. He even breaks through the notion of what a deity ought to be. And this, I think, is about as good an example as you can find anywhere of the trickster hero. Now, that trickster trait turns up in deities like Yahweh. Yahweh's a trickster. He lets people build a building, and then because it gets to be 3 stories high, he's afraid it's going to wreck heaven, and he comes down and floods the world. That's a trickster stunt. That's a ridiculous act. And we think it quite normal for a deity to behave that way. If a human being behaved that way, we would send him to a lunatic asylum. And here you have the deity coming through as the trickster, as the destroyer, as the disruptor of programs.